an interactive discussion panel about REITs, Fibras and Fiis. Bringing the REITs and SiiLA teams together gives me so much joy after such a long time. My name is Antonio Colindez, and I'm the COO of REIX, and I'll be your host for today's event. Without further ado, I'd like to present the other panelists, and I'll start with Colleen. Colleen is visiting us from our hometown, home base in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, Colleen.
Wonderful. It's been a great week here in Mexico City. We have Giancarlo visiting us from Brazil. It's been great to all be back together. We've had some very positive things. We're here today to talk about REITs, which I think is important to kind of take a step back on how REITs came to be here in the U.S. So in the U.S., REITs started in about the 1960s. It wasn't until we had some tax reform in the late 1980s that we had a modern day REIT structure like you would see today. In the 90s and the early 2000s, REITs certainly took off here in the US. Today we have about 1,100 REITs, about 225 of those are traded on major stock exchanges. So certainly it took many years, but we have a ton of REITs in the US. I happened to start my career working in office leasing as a broker. I transitioned to working at a REIT. So I worked at SL Green, which is New York City's largest office building owner. We owned about 40 million square feet. So certainly, had some experience prior to REIX working at a REIT. When we think about REITs globally, there's about 40 countries that have REIT structures that are similar to the US. Brazil and Mexico happen to be two of those. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more from JC first on how the Fibras have established in Mexico.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm extremely happy to have you here, guys. And I hope you can enjoy the city as much as I do. And regarding Fibras, it's a subject that I love because of many reasons that we will touch in a few minutes. But we have now, currently we have 16 Fibras in Mexico. The first IPO was made in 2011, which was Fibra Uno, the biggest Fibra in Mexico. And then we had this gap between 2011 and 2015, just right after the crisis of 2010, and the majority of the Fibras were created between 2015 and 2021, right? So the last IPO was made in first quarter 2021, which was Fibra Soma, Fibra, which is specialized in shopping malls in a very, time of crisis, and it's interesting to see this creations, right? So we have around Fibras represent around 60% of professionalized assets in Mexico, and they represent around 80% of the transactions, institutional transactions in Mexico. So they're like a very well-known vehicle to invest, and I'm very, very optimistic on the future of this vehicle.
That is great. John, how about in Brazil? How are fees structured, and kind of what is the story behind the history of fees in Brazil?
Yeah, before she started, I need to say hello. Hello, everybody. I should my mom are proud of her son because I'm live on Mexico in English. Let's go. Okay, it's a pleasure to me to be here because it's funny because for Brazilians, Mexico, it's like a reference because as JC said, they have 6% of their assets located in Fibras. And in Brazil, we started in 1993. We will achieve 30 years now. We have 353 different funds to invest, and we have just 20% of them they represent just 20% of them. The difference of Fibras is much more. And we have different type of assets in Brazil. We have like retail, office, industrial, and I'm not kidding, cemetery. You can do investments in REITs, in cemetery in Brazil. Yeah, it's totally crazy. And this industry is starting to have more acceptable of the audience of investors now. Since 2012, they start to have more returns, they understand more, but we'll have more to discuss about this. So that's the big picture in Brazil.
That is really great. So thinking about and going a little deeper into the conversation of Latin American investment vehicles like REITs, Fibras and Fiis, just can you guys kind of give us an overview of the fundamentals, the capital structure, the investors, kind of how are these vehicles formed, what do they invest in, and what is the future for these REITs? The Fibras and Fiis.
Fibras. Well, in Mexico, we have, like I mentioned before, we have diversified Fibras and specialized in different sectors, such as industrial, shopping malls, hospitals, schools, and as well as antennas. So we have a very diversified scenario for them, and typically the investments come from pension funds in Mexico. So pension funds are the major investors from the institutional standpoint. So they invest around 2% in alternative assets. Alternative assets for us is SECADES, which are certificados de capital de desarrollo, which is a financial vehicle through, that was created especially for pension funds to invest in real estate long-term projects. So that's the major investor. And then we have as well retail investors that are willing to participate in this market, because it's different from what happens in other asset types. We have the investment supported by real estate. So that puts on the table a very, very interesting model to invest in, right? So that's an overview, or in general speaking, the scenario of the investments in REITs in Mexico.
Yeah, that's super interesting. There's about 145 million Americans that invest in REITs. So that's like 43% of US households. So that's either directly as independent investors or through a retirement structure. So that's obviously a huge portion of the US population, and it's been such an intricate part of kind of wealth management and investment growth. So it's exciting to kind of be in the early stages of that here. I think there's certainly a lot of opportunity for the direction that the Fibras can go. I know these have been a little bit more established in Brazil, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about the investment structure.
Yeah, it's fun to hear the number of people investing in the United States and Brazil. It represents less than 1% of the population. We are so glad to have more than 1 million people investing in REITs, but it had a significant increase because due to the drop interest rate in the last 2 years, they dropped like 10%. Mm. And they try to find in REITs more returns. Mm. And the returns are around 7 to 9% in Brazil. And that's the only reason that people are coming to find different ways to do investments. Also, we have pension funds do investments, and we will see in the near future a significant change because the rules in Brazil about pension funds have changed, and they can buy more assets directly. They used to buy fees, and they have millions of reals investing in assets, and this money will come for fees, and it will change our industry at all.
That's really interesting. One of the things that we've kind of been talking about over these days is just the difference in the investments that are done in fees and in Fibras and in REITs. Can you kind of talk about the different types of assets that can be in a fee? is from an office building to a floor, and how that works in Brazil?
Yeah, in Brazil you can buy one floor and open a REITs. You don't have a lot. That's the reason that we have over 300 REITs in Brazil, and we have nowadays more than 188 traders. That's totally different than Mexico, and that's so funny because we use Mexico as a reference in Brazil. People love to compare Brazil and Mexico, but when you look and when you understand, it's totally different,
Exactly.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense that we, as the second largest economy in Latin America, have 16 REITs, right? But yeah, it's fair. And it's totally different market, and I think that the investments decisions are totally different, right? So even if we have capital inflows to the countries like foreign capital inflows, it's totally different the way we can invest here from the institutional standpoint and versus Brazil. It's so different.
Yeah, now it's a trend in Brazil. Everybody wants to open a fee and to start to trade. Yes, and as I told you, I'm not surprised if someone buy a dog's house and start a fee because in Brazil, I think
It's possible.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's true, Let's see. But we are very happy because our industry get a flow of investments, and we are delivering more. We are, the construction increased more than 5% during this tough period. Just because the capital comes, that's the first time that our interest rate is around 3.5%. Because always in my life, it's over than 10%. It's easier to put my money in a bank and not have any risk of investment and just waiting the returns. And now people should find different returns, different ways of investments. And that's the reason because everybody seems to know a little bit about assets, You're born in an asset, you will die in an asset. And during this period, you live in a different assets, work in an asset. And that's the reason that we have a big window to increase in Brazil.
Sure. And that actually is a really good transition into the next question, which is, throughout these past years, we've seen such innovation happening in the space of creating trading apps, information, warehousing of data to make more informed decisions, apps like Robinhood, Acorns, E-Trade, Stash. How has access to these platforms and additional widespread access to information kind of changed the game for REITs, Fibras, and Fiis? Who's looking at these? Who's investing in these vehicles, and how are they doing it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because if I go back to my experience when I was at Asset Green, by the time I was there, we had really comprehensive data and analytics solutions. We had performance metrics. It was well known what our portfolio was, what our strategy was, what the financial stability, kind of how we were. So that was already there. And there was also technology solutions. You could invest via E-Trade as an individual investor. So there was really tools available to enable and empower an individual investor to understand the investment that they were making. If I look at Latin America, that sophistication of REIT reporting really has just come about via the SiiLA solutions. I know that they've been very focused on finding and creating solutions that inform investors in a more meaningful way. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your approach. Sorry, it's on color.
Yeah, of course, it's a pleasure. Yeah, in Brazil, and I think in Fibras and REITs, the companies needs to follow a rule to show their results every month and every quarter. But when you are looking for more investors, more money, you should be more transparent. You should have different ways to do analysis. And looking at this, we find a solution with one the major platform in Brazil they call Clube FI. They have the major platform, and they provide reports. They provide dividend yields, the quote prices, and we make a JV with them because we have what we exist behind of these numbers, like properties, vacancy rates, asking price, and we made the major platform for investors. And if you want to explain a little bit more for single investors, like a doctors, lawyers, wherever, they can open this platform and they have all information that they need to know to do a good investment. And it's changed a lot. And we launched this platform last year, in August that last year, and we have a lot of users and they are loving the type of information we are delivering them because they can open their smartphone and see what happened with their investments online, and that's different that we are doing in Latin America.
That is fascinating. Yeah. And it seems like it was timed perfectly with the inflow of new investors into the fee market and the lowering of the interest rate. So congratulations on that. How about JC? What products are we kind of working to solve those pain points in Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, today we have basically two pain points in the market. So the first one is the lack of information, the lack of methodology in the information that we have. Then there is information in the market, but it's difficult to digest, and that's difficult to gain access to, right? So, secondly, you don't have, you have only one platform. If you're a retail investor, and you're looking to invest in this kind of vehicles, the only way that you can do an investment is, and you can make an investment is through GBM platform, GBM platform now, and that is it's the only technological platform that we have in Mexico. If you want to make an investment as a retail investor, right? So we are lacking a lot of technology, and we have a really serious lack of information and methodology. So, I'm sorry. So. And this is very important, and I'm just adding to what Giancarlo was saying, which is when you have this kind of vehicles through which you receive dividends from two different ways. The first way is you receive dividends from the share, from the price of the share, and the second way is to get dividends from the rental flows. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have this combination between real estate fundamentals and financial metrics, I mean, you don't have anything, because maybe you want to know the price of the certificate or the share. Yeah, it's easy to find because you go to Yahoo Finance and voila, you have it, right? But if you want to know how many tenants Fibras have in their bellies now, that's impossible as an either institutional investor or retail investor, right? So it's very difficult to gain access to that kind of information. It's difficult to gain access to, for example, absorptions, right? If you want to know the asking rents of a particular submarket or market, sector, subsector, etc., it's complicated. So it's you can go to check the reports of the 16 different Fibras that we have in the market, but that will take you 10 years. It took us we developed this beautiful platform. I love Fibra Analytics, and it took us around 2 years to create that super platform that combines fundamentals, real estate fundamentals, and financial indicators. And with this, you have a very powerful tool in which you can check, you can review what's happening with all the performances, all the performing of the real estate assets. If you want to go to the nitty gritty, or you can check in a very high level what's happening with each trade, right? So it's incredible.
I think you're totally right. It's incredible what we've been doing with Cuba Fee and with Fibra Analytics, and just having that perspective, right? Being able to bring together the asset-based data and combining that with the financial metrics. I think that's really what's extremely innovative of what we're trying to do, and allowing and giving users the ability to easily compare, contrast, analyze, and make informed decisions. So I totally agree with you guys. I think it's really cool what you guys have been.
Yeah, if I can add, sorry to interrupt. We will starting to do small programs, small courses to provide not only the platform, but how to use the platform and some knowledge about what is net absorption, what is gross absorption. If you are interested to know about, follow us in our social media, because in Brazil and in Mexico as well, we will do this small course to helping you to understand a little bit more about the industry, and that's the future, more transparency, more information, and that's it. We are so glad to be a part of this changing the real estate industry in Latin America, especially.
Yeah, I mean, we were discussing just how real estate is the oldest business and how it's going to continue to be a business, kind of like what you were saying, and being able to promote that development and push the ball forward in Latin America is our objective with SiiLA. That's why we do what we do, and we're passionate about that. So, I think it's really great.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. As we're talking about it, I couldn't have imagined doing my job without having insight into those types of things. So I think it's great that an investor can now get an understanding of what's the quality of the tenant base, what are the rents, like what types of assets, kind of all the things that if I was investing in REIT, I would be very focused on. And I think that we're still a little bit in the early stage in both markets. So there's a ton of opportunity, and I'm proud of us for really being innovative and being really the first to and the best, first and best. I'll say that, but it's certainly exciting. I would love to hear just kind of a last point. So it's obviously been a pandemic for the last 16 months or so. I would say it was like hopefully it never happens again, once in a lifetime type thing. But as I was preparing for this meeting, I was thinking and did some research on kind of what were the losses that the U.S. REITs had as a result of the pandemic. And I discovered that overall in the last 16 months, we've been able to recoup all the losses that we had initially. So that was, I think, a very promising figure. It was somewhat similar to what happened after the 08-09 crisis. So I think it shows a tremendous amount of resilience. So I'd like to kind of hear a little bit more about how the pandemic has affected fees and Fibras for you guys.
Yeah, it affects in Brazil, but as I explained to you, we are in a different way in terms of interest rates, and it made a huge difference. But in terms of returns, shopping malls, of course, we are like 4 years ago. But when we look for industrial sector, they are run as a race car, and offices, they are walking slowly. Depends on segments, but it affected. But one thing it's important in Brazil, people should understand, and if you are Brazilian, you will understand what I'm saying. People believe real estate, it's possible to do a day trade. It's not. It's a long-term investment. It's impossible to put your money today and take out tomorrow or two hours later as a normal stock, and that's our challenge, because people come to do day trading in real estate in a long cycle of investment, of returns, and that's our challenge, because people are looking for different investments, different returns, but they don't want to understand a little bit what they are putting money. They just looking returns, and of course the REITs were affected a little bit, but they are recovering faster than we expected.
That's really interesting. And one of the things that came to my mind when you were talking about returns was the SBI, and how you can kind of use that as a measure of success with returns. Yeah, in Brazil, we are developing different things to help in the market. And the last one that we created was SBI, SiiLA Brasil Index, because we have different indexes just to cover REITs, but we didn't have one index special for real estate. And when we compare, it's clear to understand the impact of the money
in the REITs because it affects the cost price, but real estate had with SBI, it's clear to understand returns and how the COVID impacts the price of the asset because it's totally connected with the revenues that can projected, and with SBI, people are understand a little bit. We need to teach them how to use an index because it is the first index in Brazil to cover and to represent 100% of this type. We have one for shopping malls, we have one for industrial, and another one for offices. And we do this comparison nowadays. It's possible to see and to understand the cycle and to share, to keep a more relaxed investors. You can be, now you know where you are. Because
that's a benchmark.
Yes, we have a benchmark. That's the one.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you have any other additional comments you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of revenue and regarding your question, Colleen, in terms of revenue, industrial fibras in Mexico have been the most resilient ones, right? So we can see now that they have this sluggish recovering, by the end of 2020. But now we can see fibras like Funo that they are now as they did before COVID. So I think they're in a good position. Obviously, there are fibras that are trading on a 70% of discount on asset value, on net asset value, right? But we can see a lot of them like trading at very good moment. So I think I'm very optimistic on on the future of these vehicles. And what I can see is that we will have at least one or two more maybe this year.
And you've also had some consolidations that are kind of in the work.
No, I mean it's not official now, but we have had this announcement a couple of months ago, and which two fibras are kind of consolidating, but it's not official yet. We will have to wait a little bit until third or fourth quarter.
Don't break the news yet.
Yeah. I mean,
Can I do a question for you, Colleen?
Sure.
In the United States, of course, you have different assets to do investments, but it's more common in multifamily properties.
So multifamily is a really popular class in the US. So apartments for all of you American. I would say, so SRE, the company that I worked for was primarily a office owner. But we did own a small amount of multifamily, and the returns were so great on that small amounts, they ended up buying more multifamily. So it's been a great class. Rents have been pushed, especially in metropolitan areas, and people have seen more returns, which means there's more money, people will go make more of them. And that's unlike you guys, where multifamily is just beginning. In
Brazil, we have less than 15 assets in this type of investments, and we don't have any REITs in Brazil for get this type of investment. But I do believe that will be the future, because when you say 45% of Americans are doing investments in real estate, and then looking less than 1%, I'm ashamed to me, but let's go, Brazilians.
It's huge because you see like caps, and before pandemic, you could see caps under 4%, right? So, and then Mexico is the same. I mean, it's a very new asset type, but we have an announcement. We had an announcement like 2 weeks ago that there's an outlet that will be specialized in multifamily here in Mexico. So it surprises me because it's around, it's the same. We have around 15 to 20 buildings in operation. So there hasn't been a really transactional market on that asset type, right? So it's kind of, let's see what happens. I don't know. I mean, it's complicated to see or foreseen what will happen with caps and what will happen with absorptions or etc. But it's interesting.
In Brazil, most of them are under construction. But let's see, I do believe that's the future, of our industry in Brazil in terms of real estate. Of course, we have space to keep pushing industrial warehouse, offices, but I do believe in these products, multi-family assets. And we will start to cover in SiiLA as well if you want to be connected with
If you want to know all the details,
Yeah.
Carlos got it.
Follow us.
He's on the beat. Well, that's great. I'm super happy that we all got to be here in Mexico City. It used to be something that we probably took for granted. So great to spend some time with you guys. I don't know if you guys have any last points before.
No, just to say thank you to having us here in your hometown. And it's always a pleasure to be here with you, Americans and Mexicans.
And the Costa Rican.
And Costa Rica, sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's so sad.
I hope you enjoyed this event, and certainly we will do more than this
Next time we're going to come to São Paulo.
Yes, you are my God.
So before we close, I just want to make sure that we are able to address any questions that the audience may have.
Okay.
So it's from Esteban Oñora, and it says, ESG wave is beginning to lead strategic decisions around the world. What do you think the impact could be on REITs specifically? How will it impact the return on investment? What actions should be taken to adapt this new risk analysis model?
What was the beginning part of it? Sorry.
So it's basically how is the ESG movement gonna kind of impact the REITs decision making in terms of investments and returns and from an investor perspective as well.
Like a green.
Green buildings.
Yeah, I would say in the U.S. it's already a very established criteria. I mean, very rarely does a building get built that's not, I believe it's certification where these things aren't taken into account. So it's maybe 20 years ago, it was a completely women's was. We were developing a LEED certified building 15 years ago or so. And it was one of the first to be built in Denver, Colorado, which is my hometown. At the time, that was, I guess, forward thinking, but now it's industry standard. So I think that the impact on the returns and what's gone on has already been seen. But I'm positive that it's a different situation in Brazil and Mexico, probably.
Yeah, this term is totally new, and of course, it will change our industry. I do believe it. It's like if you don't have a green building and a standard in your building, multinational can't go to this building.
That's what I was going to mention. A lot of the big multinational tenants are placing these types of requirements.
Yeah.
And if you want that quality of tenant, if you want those revenues, you're going to have to build to their specifications.
Yeah, you will.
Money makes the rules.
Exactly.
What I think is, thank you very much for your question, Esteban. I think it's super interesting. What I think it's that it's not only just the green thing or the green side of the equation. We have to add as well all the social and government or corporate government areas into this equation, because it's like I said, it's not only the green stuff, and if you have these three things combined, you can ask for, just like you said, you can ask for more money, right? So in Mexico, we do not have any. We have started a couple of 6 months, a couple of months ago maybe, and but we don't have any clear criteria on how this ESG thing will impact the investments in the portfolios of the Fibras or SiiLA or another vehicle, right? So what I think it's we have a very, very huge business opportunity, having an analytical tool that help us understand as well how this ESG criteria will impact in the investment scenario in Mexico. So yeah, it's interesting. Thanks.
I think it'll be exciting to check back, because I'm sure there'll be some things that we add over the next few years and stay focused on. So I think that it's a great question. I'm sure to stay on the beat and get this answer.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Well, guys, I'm amazed at all the great content that we've discussed today. I want to thank our participants for being here. give you guys an opportunity for any last closing remarks, if you have any.
Now, a special thanks to you guys, to all of the audience for tuning in today. Thank you very much. And I'm glad to take you guys for a really good tacos. And now that's all. Thank you very much to all of you.
Wonderful. I also want to say thank you to the SiiLA Mexico and SiiLA Brazil teams. They've done a wonderful job building these products, and the Mexico team has been very welcoming. So it's great to be here, and we'll be back soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.